New business, item number 1, Ms. Standridge. Authorization of agency funding agreement with Boys and Girls Club, total $100,000.
Yes, good afternoon, council.
Good afternoon.
If you'll recall, about 3 months ago, the council wished to apply the GFRFFI unreserved fund balance for the last fiscal year to 3 different agencies for different items. There was para for the Greens update. There was animal shelter for their, actually what you just heard about, for their roof replacement. And then this is the last one for the Boys and Girls Club. It's a total of $100,000. We have gotten all of the specs back for the improvements that they want to do to their building. This $100,000 is actually going to be added into a larger sum that they have been fundraising and have gotten a grant for. And so this is going to be updating their facility. And then all we are asking to do now is to authorize signage of the funding agreement with them.
Great. Any questions or comments?
It's a good place.
We have anybody here from the Boys and Girls Club? Nope. Mr. Tyner, you've been the catalyst and proponent of this. You want to make any comments?
One thing I'll have to say too, that I really thank them. You know, we always like to reward people who have trying to help themselves, and they've really worked hard their capital campaign, and they've raised lots of money.
I think that what we got back from them was that they have about $800,000 that they've raised for their capital
Great.
campaign. This is just one piece going into it.
That's great.
I was gonna say too, I was honored to be the chairman of that board for 3 years. And the board is a great group of people, but they've really stepped up in this public-private partnership to raise that kind of money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a great thing for the city to support. It's a great thing for kids across the city.
In this
So I make-
environment, to raise that kind of money
That is really good. I make a motion to
a lot of
approve.
hard work.
Is there a second? Ms. Howard?
Second, I'm sorry.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, item is approved. Item number 2, Ms. Standridge. No, it's
You got it.
not
You
all
got
you,
it.
it's got my name. But was there, last week, we believed we had closed the lid on the 2026 capital projects budget. Was there one other item?
There are actually 2 other items, and they're all encompassed within Elevate. So we finished the general fund side of everything. All of
Okay.
the general fund items in the RFFI and Alabama Trust Fund, all of those have been taken care of.
Okay.
It's the Elevate side that we still have out there. There are 2 items within Elevate. There's $800,000 for Sokol Park that is for lighting and cameras. In different aspects of Sokol Park. And then there is the interest income that we have earned on Sabin Center assets to be recognized as revenue and then also applied to the Sabin Center project.
The standards, and also, and I may be thinking of another funding source, in part of that 350,000 of that for Mason's Place?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry,
The
yes.
remainder would go for lighting.
So lighting, security cameras, Mason Place is getting 350 of that, 3-ish?
Yes, sir, would be our recommendation.
Okay. And is anybody from Elevate is speaking, or are there any questions or comments?
I can answer any questions that you have on it.
Mr. Crowe?
Good.
The Mason's Place, by the way, is contingent upon Northport and the county matching our amounts.
Dollar for dollar, or is there a pro rata amount?
We left that to be discussed. Last time, the county actually exceeded our match,
Okay.
and Northport probably, I think we put in $500,000 and they put in $250,000, so it was pretty significant.
We probably expect that on the wall, that they would.
Yeah. I would think.
I would hope so. Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay, motion.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, that wraps up the Elevate portion of the 2026 capital projects budget. Check.
Check.
All right. Now, just as we're cleaning that off, I've asked you, and you and I talked about Thursday or Friday. What are we, this is 1st of July, we're roughly 8 Tuesdays away from, Mr. Charles?
I asked Scott to be able to review the city code with me. So
Okay.
he is up in case I need some assistance.
back
with
there.
that.
Okay, I was gonna intro you first. So, we've got eight weeks roughly as we're now full into budget season. I think, Mayor, you and your staff are already engaged, right, in your budget, your machinations, right?
Yes, sir.
And so I wanted to build us plenty of time into that as well, although some of it we may have to leapfrog, making sure that's parts that y'all have covered at the staff level. But to kick us off, I told Ms. Standers there's some conceptual things I just want to make sure that I understand and am familiar with before we go into the mechanics of the numbers of it. And I think, Ms. Standers, the ones I mentioned to you is there was an issue recently, and there's probably been multiple of those, where it is not unusual at all within a department for a portion of funding that's been budgeted, particularly for salaries and benefits, right, to not be used during the course of that FY, either because we can't hire, or there's turnover, somebody leaves, or it's just the gap in between.
Correct.
What strictures apply to that, I guess financially and legally, since we have the lawyer up there?
Sure. And this is kind of why I asked Scott to review with me, just because I can read legalized city code and know how that applies to me financially. However, it always helps to say that, yes, I'm on the right track with what the legal language really means. So all budgetary procedure is governed by Chapter 2 within city code. Chapter 2 is just the administrative part of city code, and then embedded within Chapter 2 of administration is budgetary procedure. So Article 3 of Section 2 of Chapter 2 is budgetary procedure. And you know, obviously it's nice and thick. As you go through, you'll have a number of different definitions, but really what I want to, I guess, kind of concentrate on that will answer your question is Section 239, which determines budget amendments and line item transfers. Within code, when it talks about adoption of the budget, it does talk about adoption of the budget at a department level. And so departments are set within the budget that the police department gets $32 million. The city attorney's office gets $3 million. It's at that level. Even though I know that you see the line items of salaries, fringe benefits, outside services, and we talk about them at that level, they're not necessarily adopted at that level. Per city code, they're only adopted at the department level. And within that, department heads are kind of given discretion over the line items within that overall department. And so I'm going to read to you Section 239, which deals with budget amendments of line item transfers. Budget amendments, except as a loan or a line item transfer, an appropriation may not be altered nor expenditure made that is not appropriated in a budget or amendment thereto pursuant to the terms of this section. And it's within the code of Alabama. The council may, by ordinance duly adopted, amend the budget provided that the chief financial officer prior to the amendment verifies the following: that there exists unencumbered sums sufficient to fund the proposed amendment, and 2, that the overall budget remains balanced as provided herein. And then we go to line item transfers. A budget amendment shall not be required for a line item transfer within a department's current budget category for operating expenses, capital improvement, salaries, wages, and fringe benefits. Provided, however, that no one line item transfer shall be permitted except in accordance with the following terms and conditions: that sufficient unencumbered funds in any other line item of the department's operating expenses budget category are available to be transferred to the applicable line item requiring funding; that there is no change to the total department budget nor the total appropriation for the department's budget category; that the line items from which such funds are transferred are reduced accordingly. All line item transfer requests shall be subject to the review and approval of the chief financial officer, who may refuse to approve any line item transfer that he or she deems necessary. to be inappropriate or financially unsound. The chief financial officer is hereby authorized to develop procedures and forms to implement line item transfers and to account for the same within the city's financial system. And so to that end, we've produced and published an SOP basically that deals with budgeted items and line item transfers and budget amendments. It deals with ones made in every single fund.
What's an example of a line item transfer?
I can give you one from my office real fast. So for instance, in my FY
And I don't wanna derail her, but just, what's an
in,
example?
in FY 25, I believe my office had $500 budgeted for postage based upon the amount of communications and overnight mail and return receipt mail that's been required largely for the University Boulevard East project. Our office has exceeded that $500 of that line item. We have another 15 or some odd lines. There's travel and training, there's machine rental,
Okay.
and outside services. And so if that 500, if we spent 750, but we have extra money in, say, outside services, we move that extra 250 over to that postage line item.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Tanner.
Okay. So within our SOP, there's it was implemented on July 31st, 2023, and last updated in 2024. Thank you, Ms. Sheaf, wherever she may be right now. Okay, so within it, we cover every single fund that the general fund has. That the city has, including the general fund. And within the general fund, we have procedures that say specifically this. Following section lays out policy by fund that must be followed when requesting a budget revision for the general fund, Fund 101, which is what we call it in our accounting term process for our general ledger. These revisions procedures will be considered amended. Line item revisions, excluding salaries and benefits within a department's operating budget, can be entered by the department, or the department may request the A&F Budgets and Strategic Planning accountant to enter the revision. Appropriate backup documentation must be attached within the revision, including approval by the department head. Line item revision requests that include salaries and benefits must be approved by the mayor. The following information should be sent to the Director of Budgets and Strategic Planning, who will then forward to the mayor for approval. Total amount requested for each line item, reasoning for the request, and any applicable quotes, attachments necessary for backup. Salary savings revision requests below $5,000 can be approved by the CFO. Revision requests within the general fund, the 101 fund, that cross operating budgets or funds must go to the Finance Committee and obtain council approval. These requests are required to be sent to the Director of Budgets and Strategic Planning by Wednesday at noon, with all necessary backup information to be placed on the next Finance Committee agenda. The following must be included within the request: total amount requested, reasoning, and any applicable quotes or attachments. Revision requests within the general fund that use restricted fund balances, ambulance franchise fees, municipal court fees, TPD funds, must go to finance and obtain council approval. These requests are required to be sent to the Director of Budgets and Strategic Planning by Wednesday at noon, all necessary backup placed on the Finance Committee agenda. The following must be included, same issue: total amount requested, reasoning, any applicable quotes or attachments necessary for backup, and with department head approval. That kind of information goes through every single fund that we have within the city. And so those two are really what set out
Those two.
those two pieces of I guess published documents is what really sets out the procedure and ability for line items within a department to be moved around.
Okay, so, and I ate a lot of lunch, so, but here's what I think I heard. I thought I heard 4 different levels of budgetary changes in there. I thought I had heard a low level, under 5,000.
So if there is a salary savings request,
Salary
change
savings request.
That is
Below
under-
5,000, you can do that. right?
below 5,000, I can do
If
it.
it's above 5,000, it
The
goes
mayor
to the
can-
mayor, right?
Correct.
If it crosses departmental,
If it crosses departments
crosses departmental
or
it-
funds,
or funds, it comes to finance committee.
correct.
And then the final one was restricted accounts?
Restricted accounts, yes,
Okay.
sir.
So are those formal revisions, is there a list of them somewhere?
We keep documentation of any revision that we get as a request, and the outcome of it, because I review all of them.
Okay.
Whether or not they go on finance committee, and whether or not, or if they have documentation for mayoral approval or not, and then in the system, we keep them in our general ledger system. Yes, there's a documentation trail of every single revision through every single line item.
And at what point are those merged into, so again, I'm stabbing at it a little bit, but at some point towards the end of the summer, council receives from the mayor a recommended budget, check?
Mhm.
And then there's some back and forth and gnashing of teeth. And we approve one, and that's the adopted budget, right? That's this one. But then as we move through the year, and then, like in March, there's an audit, right?
Mhm.
But in between that adopted budget and that audit, what is it that melds those revisions into what started out as the adopted budget?
So within our financial, like our ACFR, the annual comprehensive financial report, there's actually a statement that we certify that includes the original budget and then the revised budget, and then the actual amounts that we spent per department.
And that's included for the previous year in the current year's adopted budget, right? There's a column beside most of the departmental
Yes, that would,
requests. There's a final column out to the right, the 23, 24, 25 proposed, 25 actual, typically, right?
yes.
And
Yeah,
is that,
we try and put that information in the
is
budget.
that actual, is that melding of the revisions into,
No, actual is what was actually spent. The revised budget, the
wouldn't that be
ending.
the revisions to the adopted?
No, so budget and actual spending are two totally different things. Like budget is your parameter, it's your oversight for what was spent, but there are many, many times when we don't spend what is budgeted. So actual spending, like what Mr. Holmes was saying, is that he had a $350 postage budget amount. He actually spent $750. So the budget amount and actuals rarely ever meet. We are required to stay under what was budgeted at the department level.
Okay. Did we lose a committee member? I mean, I know this is
She's right
somewhat,
there.
oh, okay.
She's there.
Mr. Crowe, are you following this?
I'm trying.
You're
I think it's,
an accounting background.
yeah, but I don't know, don't quiz me on this.
Well, go
I-
back.
No, but I do think, Carly, I mean, to me, one of the bigger takeaways to me is, okay, you've got a budget we approve that's a bucket, right, of Scott, we use legal.
Sure.
Got a bucket, and in that bucket, you can move around things within that bucket, and you come back to us after we pass that budget if something changes in the total of part of that, or so there's always, I mean, some of the things that are happening here that we talk about, there's changes going on in that department budget all the time.
All the time.
But if it's $1 million budget, the council sets the guardrails, it's $1 million.
Right, and they can't go over the million.
And if you go over that, we've got to come back and do a budget revision to,
Correct.
and so, but Scott's got the flexibility to move stuff around, and if it's personnel stuff moving around, if it's over $5,000, then the mayor has to step in.
Correct.
And the mayor has to say, yes, we can do this, we can't do this, right? But if we're creating a new position or we're doing something else, that's got to come back to the council to be a placeholder for something to establish that in the budget, right? So, I mean, I think to me, that makes a lot of sense, that you can, you've got a number that you've got to stay within. and everybody knows that. And if you deviate from that number, it's gotta come back to council. Because we've already approved a budget for that. I mean, I think it's good to give them the flexibility to do that. But if it's anything major, I'm glad to hear, I didn't know that about I don't think we ever discussed this, the $5,000, I don't remember, we have, I just don't remember that, Carly. But the 5,000, it's good that Walt then has to step in and say, yes, no. He steps in
Well,
to
and-
approve part of that. And I think that's a good
And I can
checks
tell
and
you,
balances. personally.
generally from like an operating mindset standpoint, the two things that fuel the general fund surplus are revenue growth and salary savings.
Sure.
Those are the two major components of it. There might be savings individually in like maybe some outside services and maybe some office supplies, whatever, but the two major components are going to be salary
But
savings and
that's-
revenue growth.
$200 sometimes.
So we will, as a staff, as an A&F staff, we are very aware that protection of the general fund as a total is extremely important. And so I think that over the last couple of years I've been in this office, departments know that salary savings is something that I'm pretty strict on. They do know that it's a safety net, and they will sometimes ask for it, and there's a lot of times that it's a no.
But Carly, when we have discussions about kind of the where we are discussions, right? It's a fair point to make, I think, what I'm about to say. That if I ask you something about fire and police budget, you can say, okay, in the police budget, you know, you have a pretty good idea where you are.
Oh, yeah.
Because the money that's being spent every month or whatever Scott was talking about, those changes are made, and I'm assuming there's a spreadsheet, there's something that says, we've got $40 million here. You can put that in every month with journal entries that are coming in and accounting, right, of the salaries, benefits, cars, recs, liabilities, whatever it is, right? That you kind of have a pretty good idea.
I can look up anything that you need right now.
Absolutely. To tell us, you know, right now we are blank ahead of budget. We're behind
Yeah.
budget.
We have an extremely sophisticated ERP system that we use, and you'll see the
That's
Tyler
the
Munis
key
system
point.
that we use is, it's
I
up to date minute to minute.
And we get them from them on the department level monthly. And so
Monthly.
I go through mine monthly and review by line item, because it tells me that this is, you know, your expected spending should be at 63%. And so I go through and look at anything that exceeds 63%. And some of our things, for instance, are books, dues, and subscriptions, which pays for some of our Municode and things like that are lump sums. And so I think my budget for that may be $20,000, and it gets paid lump sum in November at $16,000. So in November and December and January, it looks like I blew my budget.
That's right.
But he
so
has
I,
to answer for it every single time.
so I review that to know every month where I am.
Is that a monthly budget discussion you have with Carly?
No,
Or
so-
staff, or how does that work?
So the departments are given their budget reports monthly, and they're expected to rectify the needs monthly. We have quarterly hearings with the mayor and myself with every single department to go over it quarterly.
If Scott has a deviation in his budget to what he's saying, does he have to explain that?
Yes,
Kind of say that I'm off this is why I'm
and this is
off?
why. And this is what I plan to do to rectify it.
And even
period.
even if we're in total, we're good for the year, this 1 month, you're scratching your head wanting to know why. So all of that's going
Yeah.
on. We don't really get into that
Right,
detail. We're where we set the number for the year.
right. And
Right.
and there are times that they will
Makes
have
sense.
larger, deviations within their individual line items that we will need to talk about, and we do talk about them, but at the end of the conversation, it's an I'm not worried because your overall bottom line is still completely
You're still
clear.
okay.
Yes,
But I know we've had, if something comes up and the budget's blown because of whatever reason, I remember we had fuel costs that were crazy. There was, trying to think, fuel was one thing. that
auto
was-
maintenance was a bad
Auto
one
maintenance
last
was a
year.
mess one year. So when those were happening, you've got to do a budget revision.
Yeah,
And either they probably got to take the money from somewhere else, or you've got to figure out where you're going to move the money,
They
and that's
do.
when it comes back to the council.
and I'll say that department heads don't always love this, but we put the onus on them more so than we don't. And they have to find it within their current resources.
Okay, so I feel
Go
like
ahead,
we're
Ray.
implementing the best practices when it comes down to how this process is implemented. So I don't have any more concerns, but I appreciate the details.
Absolutely.
And
Yes,
the
absolutely.
extra
It's good to know
really
that.
details, yeah.
Ms. Holmes got a whole stack of papers there.
I actually have a copy of,
Quiz.
what I guess is chapter, 2, which is administration, article 3, which is budgetary procedure, as well as Ms. Sandwich's SLP, they're the same papers.
Yeah. I hate to say it, but Scott is definitely my double check, maybe more so than I should call on him, but he definitely is.
And there are times that we debate some of this.
And
because
what the words actually mean.
she lives in it, and I don't typically look at it until there's a question, which usually means it's not something that's it's easy or something to come across once.
Okay. Thank you for this portion. Chief, I mentioned to Ms. Standridge on the phone, during our call Thursday, you can get up if you want to.
I didn't know how many depth do you want to go?
No, you all, your department has its own separate accountant or
Yes, sir.
accounting. And what I was asking her was, do you or they, somewhere between you all, do you believe you know what a police officer cost us a year?
As far as, you talk about the salary and overtime?
Well, I'm talking about all in. I mean, if I took the total TPD uniform salaries and benefits, and I divided it by the number of uniforms that are filled in, that would give us a number. But then also, as we're doing other things, as we're buying take-home cars, obviously, that needs to be looked at as part of the cost, although the car stays as the officer. But I'm just trying to understand what the force cost us as we begin to break it down. We've got a civilian component, Ted, that's roughly how many?
Probably 60,
We
70
talked
civilian.
about this not that long ago. Yeah, I think it's like,
Okay,
yeah.
we've got
In
we've
between
got
60 and
it's not a quiz time. I'm trying to communicate what I want to understand as we begin moving later through this budget.
And then year
process.
1 is always more expensive because the vest is only good for 5 years. So that first year officer, you're ordering a vest, you're ordering more equipment. So it's a higher upfront cost, and for the next 4 years, it's lower, then it peaks again, then it goes back down.
I get it's got valleys and peaks, but still, from an operating basis, we have to have some idea of what an officer costs us a year. I mean, that's,
I guess I'm kind of confused on what you're trying to get out of that. Like, if I can help you simplify, like, what's the overall objective? So maybe I can help you get the number you exactly want. I guess.
sure, as we're talking about salary savings, and I'm assuming we fund X number of officers for TPD.
Yes, sir.
And we know, I mean, it's been a topic of much discussion that we're unable to meet that hiring goal,
Yes, sir.
right? So I'm just trying to figure out what that delta is leaving on the table.
So I might be able to answer this a little bit. So every 2 weeks, by department, we will do a salary savings projection and calculation. And so I can tell you now within the last week, because every 2 weeks we do a payroll run. And so we will do a projection of what that department's salary savings is now, and then we will, what they've accumulated to date. And then we're projecting it to be by the end of the year. And so if you're looking for salary savings for TPD, they are going to be a significant one, but we do that bi-weekly.
Yeah, and what I can do, I can have this for you tomorrow. I can have the salary, when a new officer comes in with all the new equipment, I can get you basically day one to they're ready to hit the streets, what that cost is. And then I can take all of our officers that have no rank and I can do an average of overtime. And I can kick that in and kind of show you, hey, this is what, everything for a 1-year officer can be. That's not hard for me to get. And that's why I was asking earlier, what exactly are you wanting? So I can get you the information.
I think when we get into it, at first, I'm not gonna be too interested in overtime, because in a sense, an overtime is the reciprocal of what you weren't able to hire. I
Yes,
mean,
sir,
I'm
absolutely.
oversimplifying that. But if you've got 20 funded but not hired, logic tells you you're spending overtime to meet that gap.
Yes, sir.
So I'm not interested in that. I'm just trying to understand what goes into the calculation of the cost of an officer. And a fireman too back there, Chief Dill. So obviously salary, obviously retirement contributions, benefits, insurance, equipment, training. Do we pay to send them to Aaliyah for the first year?
We do.
We do.
For the academy, yes, sir. We used to not, but since they've moved locations, we do pay now. So, but I can get you all that in a form tomorrow without any problem.
Okay, all right. Well, again, we're gonna begin going through departments in the time we've got in July, August. I'll give you a heads up, okay, when you're on deck, but that's the kind of thing.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Anything else?
No.
Okay.
Ms. Howard, Mr. Crowe, anything else?
No, I think it's
All right.
good discussion, Mr.
If
Chairman.
not, is there a
Motion.
motion?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.